Hey there, my name is Sara. I'm the Artist in Residence and Art Program Supervisor with Keswick's Wise and Well Center for Healthy Living in Baltimore, Maryland. Today, we're going to learn about drawing materials. So there's a variety of different drawing materials that you can use to get the effects that you want. I'm just going to talk about a handful today, a few that I use and a few that I've used in the past. These range from things that utilize ink to charcoal to pencils, and I've had a couple requests from folks just to go into the different specifics of different types of drawing mediums. So this doesn't encompass every drawing medium ever. It's meant to be a helpful guide if you're new to drawing or you're just trying to figure out what art materials that you like. So let's take a look. Okay, so here are the drawing materials that we're going to use today. I've tried to pick a variety of materials, things that utilize ink, Conte crayon, charcoal, and just traditional pencil. Alright, this is my Faber-Castell Pitt pen. You've seen this a few times. Of course, I also have a Posca paint pen, black. We have a Tombow pen. It's got two nibs. It's water-based. Next, we have some Vine charcoal. It usually comes in small packs. And here I have just a regular Uniball pen. It's gel-based ink. Then I have an assortment of pencils of varying hardnesses and softnesses, H all the way to 5B. There we go. And of course, alcohol pen. This also has two nibs like the Tombow pen. This is graphite sticks. There's a hard piece and a soft piece of graphite there. And some Conte and some compressed charcoal. So those are the things we're going to be looking at today. Just let me put these guys back. There we go. And let me just get this stuff out of the way so we have a clean slate, so to speak. So we'll begin with some inks right here. Let me just grab a piece of paper so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. And I'm going to start with the gel pen. So this pen has blue ink, as you can see. I'm just doing a little bit of cross-hatching here so you can see how the pen works. It's got a gel-based ink that doesn't dry very quickly, so you can really work it or make it very dense when you're drawing with it. If you unscrew a gel pen or a Uniball pen that doesn't have a grease-based ink, you're going to notice this kind of wider well that all of the ink sits in right here, and that's very distinctive, and that's usually how you know it's a gel pen or something that has a smoother ink. Some brands of pen, like a ballpoint, those inks have a more greasy, oily texture. So what's nice about the gel pen or any kind of pen that has a kind of quicker, faster, smoother ink is that you can really work those marks very specifically. Now what I'm doing here is called the rocking stroke, and you'll see me do that a few times today because that's a great mark making process. This is an alcohol-based marker. These are great if you're doing work where you're trying to dilute drawings or if you're doing work with alcohol inks and you want to work in kind of harder, firmer shapes. This pen has a chisel tip and a regular nib. So the chisel tip on any pen, whether it's an alcohol-based ink or not, is great because you can get different types of lines. So you see here I've made some fatter lines and some thinner lines just by the way I turn the nib of that chisel tip. There we go. Now if I use the other side that's much smaller, I'm really only going to get one type of mark. The chisel tip really offers a variety of mark making, but if you're trying to get very detailed specific types of lines, then you want to use that smaller tip because that's more for accuracy. Now let's check out this Tombow pen. As I mentioned before, it's water-based. So what that means is that it can be affected by water. You can create kind of watercolor effects using these markers. You draw with them and then you add water via a brush. What's nice about these pens is that because they have a brush tip on one side and a regular tip on the other side, you can get different thicknesses of strokes or marks. So here I'm going to show you how that looks here. You can go from really thick to thin with the brush tip, and water-based, as I mentioned, if I wet my finger and then just rub it through, it blurs it a little bit. There we go. See that? Next I'm going to talk about paint pens. This is a Posca paint pen, but most paint pens have this feature where it has an agitator on the tips. So you can press the tip down and it kind of fills the tip with ink. And that's important to note because sometimes, when you're drawing with these types of pens, they can start to seem like they're drying out, but they're not. The tip just needs to be agitated again or pressed down. What's great about these pens is that you can typically get a lot of coverage. This is the type of tool that's going to be able to mark over other materials like paint. It can also usually fill in large swaths of an area without missing a beat. You don't really see a lot of skip marks or individual lines here. Alright, so now to the Faber-Castell Pitt pen. I'm not really sure why it's called a Pitt pen specifically, but what I like about these pens is that this type has a brush. Now you can get smaller Pitt pens that have just smaller mark making tips, like very thin, almost to a 0.001, but I prefer the brush tip because it has a lot of coverage, and this ink in the Faber-Castell pen is really dense and it's really rich and it's going to get a lot of coverage. You can see here that I'm practicing the rocking stroke again. So what's distinctive about the rocking stroke, which you can particularly achieve using this pen, is that it's thin on the tips of the line and fat in the middle. So that's an ideal rocking stroke. Okay, so now let's talk about pencils. I have a few different types of pencils here. And what's distinctive about these pencils is that each of them has a different hardness or softness of lead. Now, if you've ever looked at a pencil and you see that it says something like 2B on your Ticonderoga drawing pencil for school, then that's denoting the softness of the lead. 2B is a medium soft lead. So the first one I'm going to show you is a B. So this is a B lead pencil, and that means that it's going to be kind of hard, but it's on the softer side of pencils. So anything that has a B on it is going into that softer, darker lead. So you can see here I'm starting to make some marks, and in terms of how they're being captured on video, they're pretty light. If I apply a little pressure here, I can make slightly darker marks. The darker you go or the softer you go in the lead, like a 3B or something like that, the darker or easier the lead is going to apply to the paper. So if you're trying to make a very dark drawing, then that will happen. So this is a 3B pencil, and here you can see that I'm making the same type of mark with the same amount of pressure, but it's darker. And then if I exert pressure, that's super dark. So that's a 3B. So that's 2 steps up from a B in terms of softness. There we go. The softer the lead, the easier the coverage. This is a 4B, so now we're just 1 step up. Again, we're getting softer here. And then if I exert pressure, easier to make those dark, heavy marks with the pencil. There we go. So much easier to get darker coverage. Sometimes when you see pencil drawings, they look kind of shiny. If you're using a B pencil, it's definitely guaranteed to happen. So this is a 5B. There we go. And that's super dark. I don't even really have to try to make it look darker. It's just happening. Super soft lead, super easy coverage. If I apply pressure, very dark. So the next pencil I'm going to show you is an H pencil. And now we're moving down from those soft leads and moving into harder leads. So if you've ever used an H pencil, you'll notice that it feels very hard. It takes a kind of lighter approach to mark making. Your lines can typically be very thin. Even when you exert pressure and you can make those dark marks, they're not going to be as dark as, say, a 5 or 6B pencil that has that super soft lead. So you can see for comparison, that's that 5B, super soft, and then right next to it, me pressing very hard is using that H is not really doing nearly as much in terms of making a darker mark. And this, of course, is an HB. This is the marriage between those hard pencils and the soft pencil lead. So this is going to get that kind of medium tone quality in terms of mark making. But really, if you're looking for something that's not too soft, that's not going to wear down too quickly, if you're trying not to make too dark a mark and you really want to have that control, an HB is a really good pencil to do that with. All right, so now let's talk about charcoal and Conte and sticks of graphite. So that's what I have here. I have some vine charcoal and some compressed charcoal just sitting right next to one another. There's a little piece of vine charcoal that I pulled out, so it's at the ready. Then of course we have some Conte crayon right here. Conte crayon is distinctive because it has a waxier feel to it, and it's typically what you see when you see kind of sanguine colored drawings from art school students. So this is vine charcoal, and it's very light and very thin, very easily breakable, and the coverage is almost instantaneous in terms of how much charcoal dust or pigment that you're getting onto the paper. You can see when I blur with my hand that it wipes away quite a bit of the mark. So if you're looking for softer materials or softer lines, then this is a really great tool. It is very dusty though, so you have to be careful if you have allergies. This is a piece of compressed charcoal. And the difference between vine and compressed is that compressed is literally crunched down in a machine and made into a block of charcoal, whereas vine is basically just the stick after it's been, burnt. So compressed charcoal is going to have a lot more coverage. You're going to be able to make very distinctive marks with compressed, and even if you try and blur with your hands, it's not going to go completely away those individual marks unless you really work them with the material. You can get thick or thin lines with this material, whereas with vine charcoal it varies. This is Conte, and Conte crayon, as I said, has a wax base most of the time. Sometimes it can be a combination of wax and charcoal that makes up the Conte color, but not really. Often you'll find Conte in different colors. So we have kind of a sepia tone here, and then a sienna tone, and then we can go into a more sanguine color, which is kind of that lighter, almost reddish color. And you can see the marks, like compressed charcoal, are pretty similar. Because it's a denser stick of material, you have a little bit more control. These are graphite sticks, and they come in two softnesses or hardnesses, whatever direction you'd like to go in terms of how you state that. So here's one of the harder pieces of graphite. Now if you're trying to use a lot of graphite in a drawing and you don't want to blow through 13 pencils, using a graphite stick is really good for that. Since you can buy it in various softnesses or hardnesses, then you can still get the marks that you want, or the types of coverage that you want in terms of light or dark. What I like especially about graphite sticks is that you can put them on their side and rub them against your drawing surface, and they're going to get a little bit more coverage. So that's it in terms of the materials that we're going to look at today, but I did want to just show you what happens when you combine the materials. So here's a drawing that I made the other day, and it's a portrait of a woman, and I used the Pitt pen to get the denser, darker blacks. I used a softer pencil to make the grayer tones on the face, the pink Tombow pen for the outline, and then I used a white paint pen to make the lighter marks inside the hair. Okay, so we've checked out a few drawing materials. You may have a better sense now than you did then. You may still have more questions, and that's okay. I encourage you to pick up some of these materials and test them out, see what you like. When I first started drawing, I was like, pencils and ballpoint ink. That was my jam. After I started taking formal drawing classes and trying things like Conte crayon and vine charcoal, you get a sense of all these different materials and what they can be used for. And the great thing about art materials or drawing materials in general is that it's not about becoming a master in one, although you can do that. It's more about understanding how the tools work so you can utilize them in the best way possible. Sometimes you could do the same drawing in 3 different materials, but one material is going to affect that drawing in such a way that it feels more expressive, or it takes on the quality of light and dark that you prefer. So I hope that you learned a couple things today, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thanks. Bye.